Something sort of magical happened in me at 50 years.
I'm excited to talk to you because we've got some really cool special new guitars that we're introducing, as you know, that are very artfully displayed behind us here. This is part of what we're calling a legacy collection.
Yeah.
And as I think the name would suggest, legacy, really, there's an idea of guitars that have a real historical significance in the Taylor heritage. And these are guitars that I know have a lot of personal meaning to you.
Mm-hmm.
This is a project that you're really involved in. So we're gonna get into some of the specific models. I wanna just preview by talking about what they are, but I wanna ask you about how this whole idea came about. So we've got 3 models that are from the kind of classic 800 series, right? So this goes back to actually the earliest days of the company, right?
Very earliest.
Right?
Yeah, we started with the 800 series.
So we've got the 810, we've got a jumbo, or 815, a
815.
6-string, and we've got 12-string 855.
That's right.
And then we've got grand auditoriums. That really changed, I think, the trajectory of the company.
We built our company on the grand auditorium.
And I know you've talked about how that's actually changed the way music was made. It was recorded and played. So we're going to get more into that. But how did this idea come about? What was the whole idea behind these legacy guitars?
Something sort of magical happened in me at 50 years. Like all of a sudden that seemed like, oh, I could legitimately talk about a legacy. I never really felt I could at 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 49 years. Probably won't talk about it at 51 years. But at 50, it's like, well, there is a legacy. There really is a legacy. And our guitars, we're always changing, advancing, and moving our guitars. And at the same time, I thought, you know, the guitars that I made back in the day, I'm going to say we made them. I was the wellspring of the designs of these. By the time we got to the Grand Auditorium, it was me and Larry Breedlove working together. I just thought, you know, I bet you people would like to see those guitars.
So I think one thing that's interesting to point out, I want you to talk about this, is these are not authentic reissues of those original models. You kind of played curator of sorts, right? How did you approach the making of these reimagined versions of those guitars?
If you take the 810, for example, if I held my original 810 that I made for myself, that this guitar became, which is, I don't know if it's 49 years old or 50 years old, I can't remember. And you held them up, you're like, well, yeah, that's it. But, you know, over the years, the shape got a little more refined. That all actually happened after the Grand Auditorium. The Grand Auditorium, our 20th year, Larry and I spent a lot of time making that guitar soft, curvy. And after that, we like, okay, we finally, after 20 years, we feel like the curves on that guitar define what Taylor are. They're X-braced because my guitars were X-braced from the very beginning. My first 810 was a bolted on neck, but not an NT neck. And the first Grand Auditoriums were bolted on necks, but not an NT neck. That came on our 25th year.
Right.
So these are NT necks because it's a better neck, right? With a bags element and just a little dial in the sound hole. And it's a nice pickup and it harkens to those days, yeah. It's an up-to-date version of what those guitars would be, but the same sound.
When you think about the 810, what do you think?
I think about that's what a guitar is. When I made my first guitars, I didn't know about any other brands. I really, truly never knew about anybody else that made a guitar. I had no idea that there was a guitar industry. I didn't even know that. Then I started seeing guitars like Martin guitars with white binding, and it's like, oh, that's the style. That really inspired me a lot. And so the first guitars that I made after the American Dream, I was making my guitars in the molds that Sam had made from American Dream. Okay. There was a jumbo and a dreadnought. That's what we had. And we took over, and that 810 that I made, really, I wanted it to look like some of those Martin guitars I saw on TV, a D28 or a D35. The first recollection I have looking at a guitar that I thought, that's a nice guitar, was the Johnny Cash show. And he played this black guitar that had a beautiful shape, It had white binding around it, white binding down the fingerboard. And I thought, I like that. That left an impression on me. And so my first 810, the one that I made for myself, it was a thrilling guitar for me to make. Like I wanted that nice white binding, nice thin black lines. I had heard about braces being scalloped. Just heard about it. I didn't really know what it was. And I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to do that. So I scalloped my braces the way I thought it might be. I didn't realize it was totally different than what everybody else was doing.
Mm.
But that's the way we kept it. When I got that guitar, it became the guitar that I played and the basis for the 810. And then we made the 815, the 855. But that 810 was the guitar that I played. It's the one and only guitar that I played. Didn't matter how many guitars we made at Taylor. That's the guitar I took out and played.
Was there a certain type of player that would play a dreadnought and then another type of player who would play a jumbo?
The history goes something like this. We're in San Diego. Right up the coast is Los Angeles. Get to the heart of Los Angeles and you're in Santa Monica. You're in Laurel Canyon. You're in Topanga Canyon. And the whole California folk rock thing was starting. No, we didn't make electric guitars when Eric Clapton or Jimi Hendrix, we weren't part of that. But boy, we were a part of this other music boom that happened. David Geffen and, Herb Alpert with A&M Music. And right there was a dealer called Westwood Music. And Fred Wallachy was a hero of the people that were kids, Jackson Brown, whoever, they're children playing guitars. And he would give them a guitar that they could pay off slowly but surely. Here's a guitar. Go make music. Come every Friday. Give me a few bucks. Pay this guitar off. He was one of our very first dealers.
12 strings at the time were notoriously hard to play, right? Didn't you have to essentially tune them down just to be able to play them? And you really, good luck if you're going past the 5th fret.
Yeah, it was somewhere between difficult and awful. It really was. People thought that they had to tune them down to D, put a capo on the 2nd fret. Ours were braced like a Sherman tank inside, but they still sounded good. We were already bolting on necks. And through the help of John Carruthers, who was a repairman at Westwood Music, and Jean Larrivee, who is a dear friend of mine, I learned some neck leveling and fretting chops from those two guys. And so I was making guitars that would find their way to McCabe's in Santa Monica or Westwood Music. And these guitars were easy to play. And 12 strings were sort of a popular sound in that music. And these 12 strings, people bought those 12 strings and started using them. And it was the modern country folk rock music genre that was accepting our guitars because they were easy to play. They also liked the sound of them because our guitars were easier to record. And when we made those, we had like a little paper template that turned into a masonite template, a little 1/4-inch thing. We put it down, draw on ebony, white pencil all the way around it, go to a bandsaw and nibble that thing out and then put it in a vise and file the shape. And that was hard to do. And then I made a few little jigs. There's a little curve, and I made a jig where I could drill a hole, like a 1-inch hole or something, with precisely right there. Okay, that curve was good, and I could nibble up to it, but at least that inside. And then I made my first little following routers and shapers where I could shape the back of it, but I couldn't shape the front of it. And one day, years later, we got CNC machines, and now it's easy to do that shape. They're hard to glue on.
Still hard to glue on?
Oh, they're a mess to glue on. And you've got to have people know what to do. That was an inherited shape. And I refined it a little bit as I got better at drawing curves. We've developed a design sense after 20 years. It started with the grand concert, but it still wasn't as soft, curvy. That at Grand Auditorium, the first ones that we made, Larry Breedlove and I worked quite a bit on that. And we got that shape that we want. It's like, well, why not make all of our guitars fit into that sort of family harmony? And so we redesigned some of those curves. We were getting dealer feedback that said, not everybody wants a dreadnought guitar anymore, but they want something that's maybe as big as a dreadnought, but, and they like the grand concert, but could you make something that's more like dreadnought volume as far as the size of the guitar? Maybe something that isn't as boisterous when you pick it, a guitar that's, I think people were describing it as maybe all around, it's a good strummer, it's a good finger style, but it's not totally geared towards strumming or totally geared towards finger style. Yeah, we started working on this design. Then we came out with the 20th anniversary, which was a rosewood spruce, no cutaway, and a mahogany cedar, no cutaway. We made 250 of each of those. We introduced it. People loved them. Then we made the CE version, cutaway with electronics. And that became one of our hallmarks. If you want to plug in your guitar, buy a Taylor. That guitar made studio work successful. And that guitar really, we came into our own with the Grand Auditorium. And my dear friend Chris Martin, says the Martin Dreadnought is the most copied guitar in the world. And I won't argue with that at all. The Taylor Grand Auditorium, the CE, is the second most copied acoustic guitar in the world. All you have to do is go to trade shows around the world, and there it is. Those two CEs were cedar top. So you had that rosewood flavor, you had that mahogany flavor. I mean, people can really, it's hard to describe the difference in tone, but when people hear it, they hear it. Acoustic guitars that have been made with cedar, so when we came out with that, the finger stylists gravitated to them. I think maybe even a lot of worship leaders that were just like strumming guitar on a Sunday morning like that too. But the finger style really helped that guitar find an audience.
So trade dress for the 514, 714, each is a little bit different, right? So what do we have with the 514 CE?
Well, that's tortoiseshell binding and black, white, blacks around it, nice trim stripes on that. And then the 714 is black with the black, white, black, the white, black stripe on the side, the pin stripe on the side, and kind of the same treatment on the top as the 500 has. X bracing on these as well. And the more modern. They're a little different in their 5/16 wide, and the others are a little wider. But our X brace went from 3/8 wide to 5/16 wide over the years. But these were always a 5/16 wide brace. I come into work here every day, and Andy's in his shop working on what the next guitar is. And at the same time that we're doing this, I'm looking at the prototypes that he's building that will be one of our next offerings. And it's all new once again, new in so many ways. And so to imagine that we're going to be doing guitars that harken to our past, our present, and our future all at the same time, I really like that.
I love that too, because it really is part of our tradition. I mean, because many of the guitars that we've talked about that you've introduced, if it was a milestone anniversary, for example, something like with the Grand Auditorium, that was an opportunity to introduce something new. For many years, that was the platform to put something new out into the world to re-inspire people. And I think since Andy came aboard, that's continued to be the case for us, and that will continue to be the case moving forward. And next year is going to be fun too.
You and I both know what's in store next year, and it's going to be really neat. And it's just nice to know that we're not out of ideas for new guitars. But boy, I love these too. Yeah, let me go look at it.
Okay.
That way I can come back and act like I know what I was talking about.
Sorry.
Okay, sure does. All right. Primed and ready to go.